I think it all goes back to what is your vision? What is your purpose? Definitely don't have the biggest vision that I've seen, but I do have a vision that includes other people. All that to say that it wasn't hard for me to kind of release control of the production, having that vision and purpose to invest in people, because the only reason that my business is growing is just because of the team that we have, that we can, produce the work.
Welcome to the Base Coat Brainiac podcast. My name is Austin Hauser. I am Chief Brainiac over here at Base Coat Marketing. If you own a painting business and you're listening in, you're in the right spot. Now, today I have John Steigleder with, I just butchered that last name, John. I apologize. With Good Neighbor Painting out of Grants Pass, Oregon. John has been with us for going on 3 years now, I think as of this month. Whenever I first met you, John, I think you were like a one-man show, and you're up to a team of 5 W-2s now. So first of all, John, thanks for being here, man. I'm glad we were able to connect, and it's been a pleasure watching you grow over these last 3 years.
Yeah, it was fun to run into you at the PCA Expo.
I know, man. I can't believe I've known you for as long as I have. I think it was our first time meeting in person. You were much taller than I thought you were going to be. So listen, man, these interviews are very much about you, your story, and having others listen in to find some value in that journey. Us as entrepreneurs, we all go through challenges, and I think it's the best way to learn is by learning from others. So let's talk about you, man. Tell us, take me back in time. Where did you start? How did you get into this? I want to hear your backstory.
Yeah, I'll go, back to being a young adult, because I think this story is probably pretty common and hopefully helpful for any young adults just starting out, trying to figure out their life. I came to a place where I was more concerned with, chasing parties, chasing fun, and just kind of came to the end of the rope with that and had to make a decision. Okay, do I keep going down this path, or am I going to, try to put one foot in front of the other and build something for myself? And so with that, just get a job, get sober. And I started, paying bills and whatnot. Made a couple moves from Bend, Oregon, where I grew up, to Northern California for about 6 months, and then ended up in Portland. And when I got to Portland, just went after getting whatever jobs I'm used to getting, customer service. I ended up getting a job at a call center doing IT support, and was going through training for about 2 weeks there. And then they found out that I had a felony that I thought was expunged on my record. And so they had to fire me. And so I ended up getting the last piece of paperwork submitted. I got that fully expunged off of my record, but I had to get a job. And I tried a couple sales jobs. I tried a couple, hotel cleaning, just anything to, pay the bills. And I remember riding the bus to my then girlfriend's, now wife's, apartment that she was living in at PSU. And just this epiphany was like, I just need to work with my hands. Enough with these sales, enough with these customer service jobs. I need to do something physical, work with my hands. And it was probably early in the year, maybe still winter, maybe getting into spring. But I went online and ended up finding this painting company in Portland called Twin City Painting. Ended up getting hired there. And it took me a few houses. They are only brush and roll, only exterior. No spraying at all, no interior. So it's seasonal work. Took me a couple houses to get it down, but once I got it, I loved the craftsmanship of it. And I really took off in there. They had a budget system where you could earn bonuses for coming in under budget. Got a couple of my friends, housemates, to come work with me. And we just really took off that season, did really well. Smashed some budgets, and from there I was asked to be a supervisor, and then like an area manager, help with training, hiring. So I really learned a lot about the business through working with Twin City Painting for about 4 years, and then ended up marrying my now wife, and we ended up moving, long story short, down to Southern Oregon, where she's from, and knew pretty much right away that it would be the right move for me to start my own painting company. But through the couple moves that we just made, we lived on a regenerative farm. In between there, we were broke. So I got an hourly job just where I could for about 6 to 7 months, and then ended up starting my painting company, as you said, a one-man show. That was about 5 years ago now.
Wow. Man, I don't think I've ever met a single successful entrepreneur that has not had some challenge in their life. And maybe I'm
Mhm.
just hanging around the right group, but there was like a meme that I was watching the other day that was like, if the main character of a show was just sitting on their ass, playing on their phone all day, how boring would that be?
Mhm.
Right? We all have challenges that we face. And I think that's what makes us who we are. And especially those that are able to learn and grow from that. So your backstory is just incredible. You guys have kids now, right?
We do. We have
Yeah.
3 kids.
Woo. Yeah, yeah. You're in the thick of it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you started out What One Man Show 5 years ago. Talk me through the early days. What did that look like? What were the challenges? How did you arrive at where you're at today with now 5 full-time employees?
Yeah, well, right off the bat, challenges. I decided to start painting going into the winter of 2020. So there's a little thing called coronavirus, going into inside people's houses. Like I said, the company that I worked for, we didn't do interiors, but I had done a couple interiors just on my own by that point, either for myself or family. But anyways, and so first job that I get, they asked me to paint. They just moved into this place. They're doing a bunch of work on it, paint these rooms, but then he wants something sprayed. And I'm like, never done that before. Not literally not once. And he's like, that's all right, man. You can figure it out. Just watch a couple YouTube videos. You can use my sprayer. And so I'm like, hey, as long as I've given you the disclaimer, I'll do my best. And it turned out all right. Not great, but it turned out they were happy with it. I did some doors, I did some closet packs, and I did their living room had a big like bookcase display case in it. And again, it turned out all right. So from there, it's just basically, man, what do people want done, and then how can I learn how to provide that for them? So it's a lot of things like stain this, can you sand this down for me, how would you paint this, and so made it through that winter, word of mouth. I live in a rather small community. I think it's about 50,000 people in the city limits here. The next neighboring town is bigger, about 30 minutes away is Medford. But it's close knit enough that referrals, word of mouth, it's been huge from the beginning. Got some exterior work, completely underpriced myself. Was used to working for $15 an hour, so I figured if I was making 20, 25, I'm like, yeah, this is good. And then my wife's like, could you charge a little bit more for this? And then I'm realizing like, oh, I shouldn't be paying for like my gas out of my personal paycheck. Like the business should be paying for that. And then, I should get paid from the business. So it was like seriously starting at ground zero business wise, and figuring it out on the fly. Actually, my first employee was somebody that I had trained at that company up in Portland, and we became friends. That was the last year I worked there. He actually came and stayed on that regenerative farm with us. And then I called him up and I was like, hey, I've got some work. Do you want to come and work for me? So he was my first hire, still with me today. He's a crew lead. We have an awesome friendship. And from there, I think the next year I added 3 painters, got up to 7 full-time and 2 part-time the following year. And this last year I just did, I pared it down a little bit, ran with a crew of 4 more experienced painters, and we were much more efficient. So that's kind of been the overarching journey.
You are the definition of an entrepreneur that is building the airplane as it's taking off, not only on the skills side, but also on like the how the hell do I run a business side of things, right?
Mhm.
So tell me a little bit about how you got off the brush or how you've reduced your time on the brush. You think that there's so many guys out there that start a business in this industry. They're on the brush and they're like, hey, I have aspirations to be a business owner. And that
Mhm.
jump, it's a very different mental shift. I know you joined some coaching programs. Tell me about that experience going from the one-man show to actually managing and leading a team.
Yeah. So I'll start with when I met you, or reached out to you in the first place. Um, it was when it was myself and Randall, who's my crew lead, and maybe I had another painter, Elizabeth, who's also still with me. But I was planning on growing to four painters that year, and I knew, just using Angie's List, getting word of mouth referrals. That's how I was getting all my business at that time. Um, and I knew that if I was going to have more employees, I needed more work. I needed to be putting in more of an effort on marketing. And so I just Googled, I can't remember exactly, but basically like painter marketing or something like that. And yours was the first thing to come up. And I was like, I figure if you could get yourself to show up first, that's probably a good sign that you could help me out. And so I reached out to you. And I remember in our first conversation, you had some guidelines of like who's our ideal business to work with, and I think like the lowest threshold was like 250,000. You asked me where I was at, and the year before I did about 80, by myself. And so, but I was like, that's where I'm shooting to go this year, and so I know, just got to make the investment. That's the direction that we're headed, and so we ended up working together. And so when I hired those four painters, when I had a team of four, I realized that besides like training them, I couldn't be painting with them all the time. I had to be getting jobs set up. I had to be training newer painters, and I had to be doing bids and stuff like that. And so I started there, but I would say that I was still, on the brush when I didn't have other things going on. And then from that year to the next year, it was like the end of that first year with four employees. We had a pretty good year, just kind of figuring it out, and we did, I think, right at 300,000. So that was, where I told you I wanted to go. We ended up making it happen. But my whole goal going into the next year was just to double revenue. I've since found out that that's not necessarily the best goal to have, but that was in my mind. Hey, it would be success this next year if we could double revenue. And it was winter time, super dead. Accounts were pretty empty, and I saw, probably for the second time, Mike Gore Hickman's commercial or ads on
He's
Instagram
everywhere.
for
Yeah.
painter growth. What's that?
He's everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. See his face all the time.
Mhm.
But the pitch that he was making was exactly what I needed to do to double my revenue the next year. Increase your monthly revenue by 30,000 or within 90 days, or money back. And I was like, well, that's a pretty good deal. That's exactly what I need to do. Again, kind of like when I reached out to you, I was like, if I want to get here, I need to do this thing. So let's invest in that right off the bat. So that caught my attention. I ended up joining their program and seeing some pretty instantaneous results. It was certainly encouraging. It was certainly informative. And then just being a part of a community that was all working, towards the same type of goals really helped that year. And we ended up hitting, doubling our revenue. It wasn't the most efficient. It wasn't the, most fun for me. We turned in some really good work. Again, we hit the revenue goal, but it exposed a lot of things that, we could have done a whole lot better, which is why I made a change this last year to go down to four painters. I just wasn't ready to have three crews, that big of company, wearing all the hats that I was wearing.
Hey man, everybody has their different growth paths and they're all in different markets. And that's why I always make a very clear point to say, like, don't compare numbers, right? And
Yeah.
if your numbers are your goal, have a reason and a purpose behind that.
Mhm.
I think as business owners, we look at revenue as like, hey, I want to double revenue, right? Profit
Mhm.
is like, if we're going to focus on a number, focus on profit. But
Yeah.
more importantly, have a reason. Like, why is that important to you that you double your revenue this year, right?
Yeah.
how's that going to feel once you get there? And I think a lot of us, and this is particularly important in the world of business owners, we have goalposts and then we move that goalpost as soon as we hit that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, when you reach a goal or you have something to celebrate, you want to celebrate it with other people. And then it immediately just washes away. And then you're like, oh shit, there's my next goal that I need to go hit.
Yeah.
So, I think it's just so important that we all recognize that, hey, we need to celebrate, great, but have a reason to go on that journey, because that journey, that path, it sucks sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I felt those moments for sure. There's been a few moments where I'm like, should I just go down to Burger King and flip burgers for $14 an hour? Because this is stressful.
Man, I feel like if we don't think at least, I would say at least once a month, if you're not like, I wonder how much I could just sell this whole business for. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like you're not on the right path, right? Like entrepreneurship, the reason that most people fail and the reason that it's so damn hard is because you're dealing with other people. You're dealing with
Yeah.
other emotions, other personality traits and expectations, right? And for most of us, we're building that plane on the way down, and it's painful. There's no way around it. It is painful. There's challenges along the way that a lot of people look at that. They're like, yeah, that's just not worth my time, right?
Yeah.
And having a purpose beyond just like, hey, I need to make some money, I think is what a lot of people fail to have. So, John, what's your purpose? Like, how did you get through a challenging year like last year to make it out this side and then start making some changes to get back to where you actually want to be now?
Yeah, that's a good question. When it was just me starting my company, I went through some, I think they were called like Smart Start business classes at our local small business development center, which, by the way, if anybody's just starting out, that was a wonderful resource to me. I'm sure each state is different, what's available and everything, but man, just getting plugged into some local business classes, help you get set up the right way. All that was great. But I remember obviously coming up with the name Good Neighbor Painting, and then spending some time just writing out like, what is my vision? What is my purpose? What are some of our core values? And one of the things for me, obviously provide for my family. I also wanted it to be big enough to not just be about me, that I could bring others along on the journey. And then kind of lastly on that, I knew that this is an industry, the company that I worked for up in Portland, we replaced almost the entire company each year because it was seasonal work. I knew that this is just an industry where you're not going to keep people, probably most people, for 5 or 10 years. Some are going to work for you for 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 years. And so I wanted Good Neighbor Painting to be a place where young adults trying to figure out life could come in and learn a valuable skill, become more responsible, and just leave in a better place, kind of like a springboard into the next thing, whatever they decide to do. And so, a big part of it has been about people for me. And I personally have been surprised at what a discipleship tool owning a business and having employees is. Like, you see these people, you work with these people every day, you hopefully care about who you work with, and you see ways that you can pour into these people's lives. And then when they win, or when they take a step forward, it's super rewarding on my part, to see that, and just to help people the same way that I've been helped in my life. So as a person of faith, I'm a Christian. I've seen it as a discipleship tool. Obviously, we can't save everybody with our business, and that's not the point. But people that want to, work hard, show up, do a good job, and then you see an area that, hey, this could really bless, or when they win and I win, it's mutually beneficial. It's a beautiful thing, and so definitely the people has been a huge part of it for me.
Man, it's so powerful when you have a purpose greater than money. I like to tell everybody, like, money does not motivate me. It's why anytime we establish like an industry partnership, I tell them the first thing I say is like, hey, what can you offer our clients? Like, what value can you add? Because I don't want any kickbacks. Whatever you're going to give me, give to them, right?
Mhm.
It becomes more of a greater mission, and that's what allows you to get out of bed each day and be grateful for where you're at, that you got 2 feet above ground and that you can do what you're capable of doing, even though it might be painful. So, John, you mentioned something really powerful that I want to dive into a little bit further. You said you want the company to be big enough to, maybe fit the dreams of others. What does that look like to you? How do you build a company that encompasses the dreams, feelings, and values of your team as well?
Yeah, I think you have to have a company that's worth buying into. I think you have to provide a value both to the community that you serve and to the people that work for you, that is high quality enough that somebody says, "Yeah, I want to be a part of that." Um, you're going to attract certain people based on that. If you're not, holding certain standards or whatever, you're going to attract maybe the wrong people. And so, with that, um, a big part for me with you got to have enough work. You got to have enough resources to, be able to eat yourself, feed your family, and bring somebody else along. And so you got to work at that. And so, finding you was, hey, I need help with my marketing. Not enough people know about me. I'm not getting enough calls. And you guys have been instrumental in helping us in a few ways, or getting coaching from, Painter Growth was super helpful again with, how do you build a successful team? How can you set people up for success? And, what do you need to hold them accountable to? Just a real life example in my business now. Last year, I told you we went down to 4 employees from 7 full time the previous year. And our revenue dropped a little bit, but not a lot. The year that I had 7 full time, we did 580. And this last year, we did 480 with 4 painters. And I can tell you that my life was a lot less overwhelmed. It was much easier and just more streamlined to get these jobs done. And so if it was just up to me and, what I like and what I felt and what I wanted to do, I would do the same thing this year. 4 painters, 2 crews, do maybe try to be even a little bit more efficient, get profits a little bit better. But I'd be totally content doing that. But I have one painter who joined me about 2 years ago, and we've become friends. He's come a long ways as a painter. I trained him from not knowing anything. He's worked with some people that taught him how to spray. He's gotten really proficient at cabinets and spraying exteriors and stuff like that. But he's 42 and he's physically not going to be able to paint every day of the year for the next 2 to 5 years. He's got like tennis elbow, stuff that just bothers him if he's doing that constantly. But I love the way that he thinks through projects, what we're going to need, what needs to be done in what order, thinking ahead, really caring about the project as his project if he's on it. I joke that if I think of 8 out of the 10 things that we need for a project, he's already thought of 12 out of 10 things that we could use on it. And so just identifying that this is somebody who would actually be a better production manager than I am. And being like, okay, well, I want to create that opportunity for him to find a career path here versus, having physical ailments and having to go find a different type of job. So really investing in him and saying, okay, well, what does my business need to look like if he is going to step up into a production manager role, and I'm going to just take on doing sales and marketing and whatever else, the business needs to continue on. And so that's what we're working on this year. So I'm going to be adding another crew. We'll run 3 crews of 2. I'll have 6 painters, and he will be kind of a hybrid, do some painting, but also step into that production manager role and help facilitate production.
Yeah, so pivoting members on your team is significantly easier than going to hire somebody new, right? Especially when you're moving them up that ladder. Talk to me a little bit about how you find those people. I mean, you're W-2s. I would say you're in the minority of those in this industry that are full W-2s when we look at sub crews. I mean, hybrid is, I think, the most popular version or the most popular structure of this business model. So how do you find your talent? How do you attract them? You talked a little bit about culture, right? So
Mhm.
having the right culture to attract the right people that you actually want to work with. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so technically I would be a hybrid. I just like my pressure washer is his own company. So I sub all the pressure washing out to him. And then I do have, like I said, one of the things that I feel like God prepared me for when starting this business was people are going to come in and then they're going to leave. How do you want that, to go? And so again, I wanted it to be a springboard for young adults. I've already had two painters come and work for me for a year to 2 years, and then go off and start like their own construction or their own handyman companies. And so we've had opportunities to sub things out to them when it just made sense, or we couldn't get to it in the timeline that I wanted to get to it, or the homeowner wanted to get to it. We've had these strategic partnerships with certain companies to where, it's mutually beneficial. So technically, I do some hybrid model, but yeah, my main focus is definitely W-2 employees. And I hear a lot, even from the beginning, like, oh man, finding employees sucks. It's the worst. Nobody wants to work. Nobody, there's no good candidates out there. Without going down a huge rabbit hole or tangent, it's like, that's just a mindset thing. There's great people. Maybe it's seeing opportunities when they're right around you. And I think a big part of it for me has just been like, what kind of life do you live outside of your business too? Like, are you in the community? Are you investing in other people? Do you have healthy friendships? When you find a good employee, like, is your business something like where they can say, wow, this is the best job that I've ever had. Like, you're the best boss that I've ever had. Like, you actually care about me as a person. So I'm going to tell my three friends, that if I'm hiring, I've got my employees saying, oh, my friend would love to come work for you. And that's just the way that it's happened for me. And, I've had some that I maybe was a little bit too optimistic about, like, hey, this person could come in and maybe we could train them up and, get them on the right path or whatever. And I've had to let a couple people go. But in 5 years, I've fired two people. And I've had great retention and, a couple people that left to kind of go on to the next thing in their lives. So that's been super cool to see and fulfilling.
Man, if you don't have gratitude in having other people go start their own business after working with you, I don't know what can give you more gratitude than that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So can you give me a few examples of the things that you do that you feel like are having the most impact in attracting those that you want to work with? Because I think a lot of people hear this whole idea of like provide value first, don't ask, and you will receive it in the future, right? But specifically, like what have you done community wise or investing in your team that you feel like has contributed to either attracting new talent or retaining the talent that you have, which it sounds like most of your team has been with you over a year, correct?
Yeah, I've had one employee with me for 4 years, one for 3, one for 2, and then one I hired last year. Um, so yeah, I actually just sat down with somebody yesterday that worked for me 2 years ago for a year, and then he was one of my newer people that I laid off in the wintertime. I'm going to bring him back on. Seems like I'm going to bring him back on this year to be uh, one of my painters that I'm adding. So
So good.
um, as far as like what has worked or what seems to work for me, again, it's just caring about people. It's, being involved in the community for me. A lot of that has been through church, and it's been through friends that we met through mutual friends. And, I've only been in Southern Oregon for 6 years. I'm pretty bad with timelines. So you might, do some math if you're listening to this and be like, well, that doesn't add up. But I just kind of throw a number out there. But I've lived in Southern Oregon for about 6 years, and my wife jokes, it's like she thinks that it seems like I'm the one who grew up here, just with the way that I've met people and become parts of friend groups and developed some great relationships. So that helps. Obviously your reputation precedes you. And if you can have people saying, hey, you should, consider working for John, that helps. And then as far as when I have an employee, what helps with the retention, I actually, at one of Mike's events, the Painter Growth Mastermind that we did in Minneapolis, Nick Slavik was one of the speakers there, and he said it, and I was like, "Oh, that's what I've been doing." He said, "If you generally overpay your people and provide them a kind of like as stress-free of a work environment as possible, to where they're not working with employees that they just hate, or that they don't like coming to work because they don't like the people that they work with, they'll tend to stick around." And so from the beginning, I remember hiring my second employee. He's actually the guy who designed the first draft of this logo, and then I think you guys professionalized it a little bit.
Yeah.
Uh, but he was working for a company in Medford, where he was doing like a lot of apartment flips and bigger projects where it's spray. And so he was actually the first person I brought on that was proficient in spraying. But I remember thinking when I was kind of making up my offer for him, like, I don't want him to be able to go down to the restaurant down the road and be able to make nearly the same amount of money that I'm going to pay him. Painting is hard work. It's a professional, like it's a craft. Uh, the attention to detail, the skill involved in doing it well, requires some effort and some training and some learning. And so I wanted people to be rewarded for the work that they were doing for me. So that's always been big for me. Generally, try to overpay people and have them kind of grow into that and be, and then offer raises, offer opportunities, to bonus if you're doing really well, reward the workers that are doing well, and get rid of the ones that are really bringing people down. And that seemed to work well for me.
Love it. So, yeah, look, man, your team, that's ultimately what's going to get you to where you want to go. Right. And, let's talk a little bit about, as you've grown, you've hired people along the way. It sounds like you went through some hockey stick growth when you doubled revenue. That's always a fun growth period with a lot of pain along the way. And now you're working more into that steady growth pattern that I think most mature businesses tend to follow, right? I know early on in our days, we did some of that double annual year over year growth, and that was a roller coaster ride. And then we
Yep.
got more into that like steady 10 to 20%, annual growth. And it's a lot more steady, right?
Mhm.
So talk to me a little bit about that fast paced, we're going to break everything and learn along the way type of mindset. What was that like? What were some of the challenges that you ran into along the way? And then how did you clean that up by maybe slowing things down and scaling back in the meantime?
Yeah, again, I love the way that Nick Slavik puts this. Is typically in a startup, you're going to have like a cowboy, kind of like, we're the visionary, like we're just going this direction, come on, everybody, let's figure this out. And, uh, there's going to be a lot of things that build an airplane as you go, like you said. And then you get to a point where it's like, okay, you can't really cowboy this thing any longer, or it's not going to serve you to continue to try to do it the same way. And the way that he puts it is that there's typically somebody who's the visionary, and then there's somebody who's like the integrator, that starts to professionalize things, that starts to systematize things. And so that's really where I found myself over the last couple of years. And a lot of that has been credit to Painter Growth. um, I tell people when they ask me what my experience was with Painter Growth is that I was, I typically see there's two types of people that come into this industry: somebody who painted and then wants to be their own business owner, and somebody who's never painted but is good at business. And I was definitely the painter who wanted to start his own business, and I had very little business skill, knowledge, tools. And so I came in with a pretty empty toolkit as far as that goes, and they just equipped me, um, you know, financials, forecasting, metrics, just basic stuff, marketing plans beyond what you guys do digitally for me, and stuff like that. And so it was super valuable. And then, developing a roadmap for, again, like you touched on it earlier, just going after a number for no reason is a bad idea, but like decide what kind of business you want to build and then like design your business around that goal. What makes sense for you, what fits for you and your people. And so, the biggest thing for me is just been trying to professionalize this, and then getting people that are going to help me, standardize things to where we have systems and we're not having to constantly reinvent the wheel as we go. We've kind of seemed to find what we do well, what jobs I do go after, what jobs I don't go after. That was one of the things when I was just trying to double my revenue. It was like, whatever you wanted us to do, I'm putting a bid on it. And so, unfortunately, too many of those bids were sloppy. And, so we did some really cool projects that year that we didn't make very much money on. And so just realizing, again, like, what is your team? What are your skill sets? And what projects are going to be right for you? And then just kind of niching down to those areas has been helpful.
So good. Yeah. And I'll also mention Mike or Hickman over at Painter Growth. Guys, anybody listening in who's looking for the path to get off the brush, you need some coaching advice. Mike has a fantastic program over there. I've heard nothing but good things. Mike's a good friend of mine. So if you guys are ever looking for that next step, who do I reach out to? Reach out to Mike and his team. They can do some tremendous work over there to get you moving in the right directions, provide you the tools and resources to help get you off the brush.
Yep, absolutely.
You've also mentioned Nick Slavik a couple of times. So Nick's actually a client of ours. Love that guy. We call him One Take Nick because any videos that we ask of him, he just does it right off the bat the first time. It's amazing. But he brings up the concept of EOS, so the visionary and the integrator. So if anybody's interested in reading a good book, it's called Traction by Gino Wickman. And it's the same. That's literally where the entire thing comes from, right? It's the mentality of, you are going to be the guy with all of the visions, the ideas of where you want to take that company. And there needs to be somebody that can actually integrate them and follow through on that. Entrepreneurs generally are going to be a visionary. They're high, like D&I on the disc, right? We're very outgoing. And the integrators are like the analytical thinker that gets it done. And having either the left and right side of the brain and one person understand how that works, or having two separate people was even better. Really helps you get the job done at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that you had that book right there. I actually downloaded that on Audible after going to an EOS breakout at the PCA Expo, and I forgot that I'd done that. So you just reminded me that I want to listen to that book. And I mean, I think this is a good opportunity too to shout out the PCA Expo. This was the first year that I went to that, and it was a last minute decision. And I'm so glad that I did. It was literally the Friday before it started on Monday. I was like, went to my wife. I was like, what do you think about me going to Colorado next week? And invited Josh, who's going to be my production manager. We went together, and it was awesome, to see some of the faces that I've met at like the mastermind with Painter Growth. And then just all the speakers, all the different businesses. It was just a wealth of knowledge. And one of those things was the EOS breakout. And so I definitely want to read that book and absorb it more.
It's great. It's a great business framework. And yeah, just to back up to the PCA, that's my fourth or fifth. And I will say that's the best one I've been to yet. It's going to be back in Orlando next year. I'm bringing the whole family for Disney World. Kids don't know it yet, but
that's awesome.
Yeah, that event, just the hallway conversations that you have, right? Like the event, the framework behind it, the speakers they have are fantastic. I always say the hallway conversations, when you're just standing around talking with somebody, shooting the shit, I find more value in those than anything else. So
yeah, it was super cool. And the social events, we have already decided we're going to Orlando, and same thing. I said, okay, we're bringing everybody. So wife's coming, my mom's coming to help with the kids so that my wife can go to the social events. And so it should be a good time.
I'm looking forward to it, man. Yeah, and if anybody's looking for a good framework to run their business on, check out EOS. I know a lot of people talk about it. There's another book that if you guys have an integrator visionary, it's called Rocket Fuel. You're both supposed to read that book. That really helps identify the roles and responsibilities. And there's actually like a checklist you can go through to identify, like, are you actually an integrator? So there's a lot of good
Mhm.
insights out there, a lot of good value. If you're ever interested in learning more about like just the fundamentals of, hey, there's a lot in this book. Where do I start? L10 meetings and rocks. You define those two things. The rest of it kind of falls together.
That's good
All
to
right, so
know.
we're getting into the weeds over there. So, John, I want to hear a little bit about how you've grown your business because a lot of guys starting under 100K, which is where you started whenever we met, they don't make it past that. It is, I would say, probably 90% of this industry is below 100K annually, right? It's a guy on a brush or he's got a guy and a friend.
Mhm.
So, what did you do marketing wise? Obviously, we've been assisting you on the digital side. I think we're jumping into meta ads here soon. So, we're going to shop some of that top of funnel marketing for you to keep things consistent. But
Yeah.
how did you actually start growing and getting out of just being a guy painting walls?
Yeah, I think it all goes back to what is your vision? What is your purpose? Definitely don't have the biggest vision that I've seen. Going to those PCA expos, going to the masterminds that I've been to. Some people have a huge vision, fueled by whatever. Um, but I do have a vision that includes other people. And I also, I guess, one thing that I've seen is that there are true craftsmen who just love the art of what they do. And they need to be the ones with their hands on it. They need to be the ones controlling the process from start to finish. And although I care about quality and I'm going to do the same on somebody else's home that I would do on my home, you can verify this with my wife. I am not a perfectionist. If I had like a handyman name, it'd be like, good enough or functional, And so, all that to say that it wasn't hard for me to kind of release control of the production. Because when you bring on new people, and especially when you're training them, and I think this is something that probably was helped with my experience at Twin City Painting when I was training, brand new painters, they're going to do it worse than you can do it, like for sure. And you need to hold them in the project to a certain standard and make sure that it finishes at a certain standard. But I think a lot of people struggle with that release of control of letting somebody else do what you could do faster
Yep.
and better. Um, and honestly, there's still some times that I kind of have that feeling come up. If a project doesn't go the way that, I kind of imagined it going, I'm like, well, dang it, I could have done that faster and better. But anyways, so I think that was one that helped me. And then just wanting, having that vision and purpose to invest in people. Because the only reason that my business has grown is just because of the team that we have, that we can, produce the work. Otherwise it would have stayed about the same, what I can produce, and maybe a helper. And then of course, I tend to take the approach to hire what I don't do well. And so marketing, absolutely one of those things that, like, I'm sure I could watch enough YouTube videos and spend enough time trying to tweak it to get a pretty mediocre result out of it. Or I could just hire somebody who's a professional who does this for a living, who stays on, the cutting edges. You guys clued me into Google local services ads when it was just coming out. I think before it was even
Right.
released to the public, like, you guys got me on that, and that's been awesome. I've gotten a lot of work out of that, and it's, I've anytime that Angie calls now, as soon as I hear the word Angie, it's just hang up. Where there's, too long in my business where it was like, I could maybe use the leads, and even though I hate you guys, like, maybe I'll use you again, just make me a good enough offer. And now it's to the point where it's like, no, absolutely not. I never want to work with you guys ever again. You're the worst. And so just hiring people to do things like marketing, that I'm just not, that's not what I do. So same with bookkeeping, same with taxes. I don't do those on my own. I hire somebody. So, to increase my leads, you guys have helped with that a ton. And I'm excited to get onto social media ads because, again, going from 480 where we were this last year, our goal this year is 800. And then, with continuing to work on marketing and sales, I could see the next year being like 1.2, the year after that being like 1.5. So, yeah, just getting people in the right spot, the right people on your team to help you grow has been definitely the key for me.
Love it. Yeah. And what you're defining right there is a marketing funnel, right? We have a faucet you can turn on and off now. And that allows you to distance yourself from those shared lead services, which love them or hate them, they're out there, right? And
Mm,
yeah, it's interesting to hear everybody's story behind Angie and how they feel about them.
yeah, it's not
um,
good.
so, John, tell me about where we're going next, man. Like you mentioned, just some rough numbers in terms of future growth. Where do you want to be by the end of this year? What does the next maybe 3 years look like for you? Given the fact that you've been through that phase of just extreme growth and you've seen what that's like, what are the next steps for you and Good Neighbor Painting?
Yeah. So there's things that I do in the community that are outside of Good Neighbor Painting, and things that are life purposes to me. So the church fellowship that we started out where we live now, we live about 30 minutes outside of Grants Pass. I'm invested in teaching there, and there's just other things that I enjoy having the freedom of time to do. And so I'm not trying to work myself out of the business, but definitely keeping it to 40 hours or so is important to me. And then balancing that with, okay, I've got people that I've invested in my business to this point that have been with me for, multiple years. And now they're starting to get married and they're starting to have kids and they're starting to think about buying a house. And it's like, okay, so realizing that not everybody is going to stay with me long term, but if I don't want to be the reason that they don't, so what opportunities can I provide? How can I pay you more? How can you earn more? And what are really your skill sets that could lend themselves to help grow this company? And so, identifying my one employee who is somebody who wants to buy a house, and realizing that, hey, you would actually probably be a better production manager, a better integrator in my business than I would be. So how do we get you into that position, and how do we make it mutually beneficial to where you're making more money and I'm not having to do that job, and yet the business is doing better. And so adding people in different roles, adding more crews, and growing in our sales is really where we're headed. I don't have the biggest vision of people that I've been around, but now before I actually texted Mike about this. We did a mastermind last year, probably about this time. Maybe it was maybe more like April. Um, but in that, he has a workbook, and he's got like your 1 year goal, your 3 year goal. And I read back through that the other day, and I realized that he calls them 3 HAG, 3 year hairy audacious goal, became my 1 year goal. And it's like, wow, I didn't expect that to happen, but I was just a couple pieces away from making that happen. And so now I can actually see being a 1.2, $1.5 million company. Whereas before it was like, I don't really know what that would look like. So
It's amazing when you go back through like your old paperwork and you're digging through that and you're like, oh shit, I forgot I even wrote that shit down.
yeah, that's why
I
it's cool to do that.
totally right. And like, I don't have a library on my desk. I just keep some important things on here, but I have a gratitude journal that I write in every day. And
Mm,
man, it is so interesting and powerful to go back through that where I was just a year ago, personally or professionally, and just look at that and saying like, my goals back then are my life today.
yeah.
And just recognizing and appreciating that, it's a
Mhm.
game changer.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to recognize is the fact that whenever I asked you what your growth goals are, you immediately started talking about your team and your time and your personal growth. And then you talked about the revenue. And I think a lot of business owners start with, here's where I want to be revenue wise. Here's how I'm going to get there. Right.
Mhm.
And I don't necessarily think that's your vision not being big enough. Everybody has their own vision. That's personal to them. You look at
Mhm.
Brad Ellison, right? I mean, he's looking to take over the damn world.
Mhm.
I look at that as what is right for you, right? And there's more than enough business out there for all of us in this industry.
Yeah.
It is about how you're going to get there, because the journey that you go on, I don't like to call it a journey. I like to call it a story, because there's not an end to it, right? You're going to write
Mhm.
a story, and it's going to be however you want to write it for, however long you want to write that for. Make sure you enjoyed along the way, because I think we all get in this mindset of like, once I get to X, Y, and Z, I'm going to be happy. That doesn't
Yeah,
happen, though, right?
totally. Yeah, and you can find yourself in situations, like I said, I have 3 kids, and, I'm married, and you can find yourself enjoying, benchmarks and success in your business, and then come home for a Saturday, Sunday, and be like, "Why can't I enjoy being at home?"
Yeah.
And, like, that's, I mean, not to get deep real fast, but it's like, okay, it's how do you not lose sight of where we are? How do we live fully in this moment while we're also working towards uh, our vision and our goals? And so that's been big for me, and that's some of the reasons that I've kind of set things up the way that I have with my business. And this last year dialed them back a little bit, just for personal reasons. And it was awesome. And, it actually, I think, set me up to see, okay, there is a way to grow, just not the way that I tried to do it that first time.
Being present, I think, as an entrepreneur is extremely challenging. We we have the shower thoughts. We'll wake up at 2 in the morning and think about a thing we didn't do that we need to do, right?
Yeah.
That ability to be present at the dinner table with your wife and not thinking about what happened that day is a very challenging mindset shift, where you need to have buckets. You have a work bucket, you have a personal bucket. And then when you're done with work, you close that lid and you go do all the personal stuff that day. You just need to make sure you leave enough energy for that personal bucket, because that's the most important one. The only people who are going to remember how hard you work are your kids, right?
Yeah.
Um, and you brought up a great point. I was talking to one of my business advisors the other day, and he's an older guy. He's retired, and super sharp. Anyways, he was telling me, he's like, look, the younger generation, they're built around this whole like grinding mentality. Like it's, grind at all costs. Like there's a, when there's a will, there's a way. He's like, business was not always like that. He's like,
Mm.
back in the day, like business was about growth, sure, revenue, but profit and flexibility in your time, and solving problems. And I think
Mm.
we've gotten into this whole mindset around like Instagram influencers in the business world telling you that you need to sell, sell, sell and grow, grow, grow. But really, in reality, it's like, what's most important to you, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
good, man.
Yep.
So John, I always like to ask, like, man, you've come a long way over the last 5 years, starting from a one-man show, getting to where you're at today. With the future, seems like a bright opportunity ahead of you at this point. Um, if based on your experiences, if you could just yell one thing from the rooftops that any other business owner might be able to benefit from, something maybe you can tell your younger self, one thing, what would that be?
Save some money. Don't spend it all on stupid things. Yeah, that's to my, real younger self. And then
Yeah,
Um, I think just the perspective that, if I look back, um, we touched on that a little bit. You look back on things that you wrote down, or you don't necessarily see the progress that you've made in the moment all the time. But if I look back from, I guess that how I started the introducing myself, where I just decided, hey, I'm going to put one step in front of the other, and I'm going to do the next right thing and try to build a life for myself, instead of going down, this path where I know it leads in destruction. Um, just seeing that, I no way, if you would ask me, let's see, 12 years ago, would I have ended up here and my life look like this? I just wouldn't have had, you know, couldn't have imagined it. But by just like doing the next right thing and like taking this opportunity when it shows up because it seemed good in the moment, we've been on quite, we've had a lot of chapters in our story, to use your metaphor. And, one of those was network marketing, building an Amway business. And, that didn't lead to anything, financially or success, but I got around some people that had healthy marriages and healthy families and had faith. And I saw it like actually in real life. And so when my wife and I were engaged, both coming from broken families, we saw an example of like, oh, this is actually how marriage could work. And this is how you make it work. You invest in it. You learn the skill to be married to somebody else and have a, close relationship like that. And so, I got into that business opportunity thinking that it could lead to one thing. And we got something completely different out of it. And so just seeing how, for me, God has used all these different experiences, these different people to sow into me at different times, and just how it's preparing me for what's next. And like I shared, not feeling like, hey, I may not have the biggest vision, of people that I know or talk to, but I just continue to, I guess, get shown a little bit more of like what's out ahead and like, what could be for me and what God has for me. And just seeing how these, none of these moments are lost. They're all building you into the person that you can be. So you can be in these seasons and feel like, oh man, I'm failing or I'm not getting what I want, but just like stay invested and do the best that you can in those seasons, because you never know what is preparing for you. And then you get to a place where it's like, okay, you get to stop for a minute and you get to look back and you see this mountain range that you've been, there was a summit here and then there was a valley, and then you got a little bit higher and then there was a valley. And then you get to catch a glimpse of like, oh, wow, there's more up ahead, and, the next adventure still waits. So I guess just sharing that with them.
So good, man. And I'll get back to that gratitude journal. I actually wrote in there this morning that I'm grateful that I get to interview you today after working with you as long as we have. I'm really excited to see what the next 3 years look like for you. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day today. And John, talk to you soon, brother.
All right. See ya.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with us on that episode. I hope you guys enjoyed that chat as much as I did. Now, listen, if you guys are hungry for more conversations like this, go swing by our website. It's basecoatmarketing.com/podcast. And finally, we are very open to feedback. So if we haven't covered a topic or there's someone you want us to chat with, please let us know. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on the next conversation for painters.